what exactly is a relocation case?
Yeah, so a relocation case is where
What is the worst mistake that a person could make when it comes to a relocation?
I think the biggest mistake is.
Hi, my name is Katie VanDeusen, and this is the Illinois Family Law Insider. And today I have Senior Associate Attorney Ryan Shope joining me. Thanks for joining me today, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
So, today we are going to be discussing relocation cases. So, let's first start with the big picture. What exactly is a relocation case, Ryan?
Yeah, so a relocation case is where one parent, specifically the parent where the minor children primarily reside, wants to relocate outside of a 25-mile radius.
Okay. And so, in terms of a relocation case, how is this different from, let's say, a normal modification of parenting time or maybe placement of the child or allocation of parental responsibilities?
Yeah, so with modifications of allocation of parental responsibilities, there's two aspects to that. There's parenting time and decision making. So if you're wanting to modify parenting time, the standard is just going to be what's in the best interest of the children regarding a modification of parenting time. With decision making, if you're seeking to modify that within 2 years since the original order was entered, you do need to show that there's some sort of serious endangerment to the children in order to modify that. Now, with a relocation case, the biggest difference is, like I said, one parent is seeking to relocate with the children outside of a 25-mile radius. So it's that location difference.
Okay, so it sounds like it's really based on, location and miles versus maybe just asking to change parenting time or decision making. It's really you're looking to relocate or change your residence, and it really is geared towards distance. That's kind of what triggers that. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, absolutely.
And then is relocation just, hey, I want to move out of state. So I'm going to have to, talk to an attorney about relocation. What is the trigger? What rises to the level of a relocation?
Yep. So it does not just apply to moving out of state. It really is based upon that mile cutoff. So if you're seeking to relocate more than 25 miles from the current residence, then that's going to be considered a relocation case that you need to follow the proper process for, even if it's within the same state.
Got it. Okay. So even if someone's living, let's say up north and, Inverness, if they were to relocate to down south above that 25-mile radius where they currently reside, that would trigger a relocation, even though they're still within the same state, Illinois, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then what exactly does a parent need in order to move? Is it, let's just say they want to move a few towns away, but let's say it is outside of that 25-mile radius. What's the process? What are their next steps?
So the first step is going to be that you need to provide formal notice of the intended relocation to the other parent, which it has to include where you're intending to move, the date that you're intending to move, and whether the relocation is going to be permanent or temporary. Now, if the other parent agrees after you provide the notice, then you can enter into an agreed order and the relocation is granted. If that other parent objects once you provide them with the formal notice, then you need to proceed with filing a formal petition for relocation, and you need to proceed with litigation, and you need to get a court order allowing the relocation.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds like it's a much more involved process if the other parent decides to object or say, hey, I do not want you relocating with my child or children.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. And then what would you say the courts are really interested in, or what do the courts look at when deciding should we grant a request for relocation or should we deny a request for relocation?
Yeah, so it's always going to be based on the best interests of the children. And so there are several different factors that are laid out in the statute that the court is going to be looking at and considering. Some of the big relevant ones are going to be, what is the parent's reason for wanting to relocate? What are the educational opportunities for the child at the new location versus the existing location? What is the presence or absence of extended family members at, again, the existing location and the proposed new location? Whether the court's going to be able to fashion a reasonable allocation of parental responsibilities between the parents if the relocation occurs. All those types of things are going to be relevant.
That makes total sense. Would you say, in your experience, one of those factors significantly outweighs the other, or do you feel like the courts really are interested in each one of those things and how, each case is unique and different in terms of the facts that exist to either support or maybe go against a relocation?
Nope, I don't think there's any one factor that's going to be a deciding factor. It really is a totality of the circumstances and weighing all of those different factors.
Definitely. And how does the judge or the court, let's say, for example, we have a relocation case, the other party is objecting, we want the relocation. How does a court investigate all of those things or those factors that you kind of just listed off?
Yep. So typically, what will happen is the court will appoint what's called a guardian ad litem on behalf of the child. So that person is responsible for investigating and making recommendations to the court as to what's going to be in the best interests of the children regarding all of those different factors that are relevant.
Got it. Okay. And then in terms of, let's say you have a potential client coming to you, they mention that they want to relocate outside of that 25-mile radius. How early should you advise them to, provide that notice, or is there a timeline that exists that you can share with everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I would tell a client the sooner the better, especially if it's going to be a situation where the other parent is objecting and we're having to litigate. But in terms of the requirement, you are required to give at least 60 days notice to the other parent. But like I said, if possible, I would recommend giving more notice than that.
I agree. I think based on experience, whenever it comes to a litigation based case or a case that is contested, the more time you can give, the better, because a lot of times those cases take time.
Yep.
So the quicker you can move on it, the better. And then, in your experience, Ryan, what is maybe the worst mistake that a person could make when it comes to a relocation case?
I think the biggest mistake is a parent just making the unilateral decision to move without providing the proper notice or getting the proper approval from the other parent or a court order. Because if you are to do that, you're not going to get away with it. The other parent can file something against you, and you can be required to bring the child back to the original location, and then you're starting from scratch.
Agreed. Yeah, that would be just terrible. And the impact that that could have on the child or the children involved in a case is just, it's too risky. So, in terms of, advice that you could give, would you say that's exactly why someone should move forward and properly file and follow this, statute when it comes to a formal request?
Yes, absolutely.
And then, do you have any personal experience or anything that you've seen in terms of relocation cases and what really impacted a parent's ability to relocate or not?
Yeah, so I did have a case where I represented dad. Mom was the one who wanted to relocate out of state with the child. It was a contested case, and we did have a guardian ad litem appointed who investigated and unfortunately ultimately made the recommendation against my client that the relocation would be in the child's best interests. And so at the end of the day, that's what ended up happening. So in these litigated situations, it's so important to have the guardian ad litem on your side because 9 times out of 10, the judge is going to end up ordering whatever it is that the guardian is recommending because of the fact that they're specifically appointed to represent the best interests of the child.
Yep, and investigate those set factors and make that recommendation to the judge. They are the court's eyes and ears. And I think, from a strategic standpoint, not having that individual, in your corner is detrimental, to the positions you may take. It's not that it, can never work out, but it definitely is almost like you're digging out of a hole versus, being on top strategically. One other thing I wanted to ask you, Ryan, is in terms of, a guardian ad litem that recommends against you, are there any other avenues based on your experience where you could help advise a client, if we really don't believe that the guardian's recommendation is taking into consideration all of the facts of the case or all the factors and weighing things accordingly, what's the next step there? What would you advise a client to do?
Yeah, so there are other options. You could request to have a custody evaluation done. And ultimately, the guardian's recommendations are just that, they're recommendations. So if you choose not to accept those recommendations, then you can proceed with having a trial in front of the judge. Now, like I said, it's going to be very difficult to get a judge to order anything outside of what the guardian is recommending, but you do have that option if you really want to go that route.
Absolutely. What good advice. And I think it's always important to talk through all different avenues with your client to make sure they're making the most informed decision. So in terms of, closing and just to make sure that we cover everything, if a parent is thinking about relocating with their child or children, what's the first step you recommend taking?
I think the first step is providing notice as soon as you have a plan in place. Because, again, if it's going to be a contested situation, then it could take quite a long period of time. So the sooner you can provide notice, the better.
And then what if you're on the other end of things and you end up receiving a notice of relocation request and you're feeling completely blindsided?
I would say consult with an attorney in that instance and don't sign anything until you've done so.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for joining us today and just talking with us in further detail about relocation cases and, takeaways. It was really, really beneficial. So thanks for coming today.
Yeah, of course.
Relocation cases can tear families apart when parents fight over moving with the children. But here's what most Illinois fathers don't realize. You might not even have the legal standing to object to a relocation in the first place. If you're not the established legal father, your ex can move anywhere with your child. And what's more scary, you might have zero rights to stop them. Here's what you must do to protect yourself in our next video.